Hey there, colleague. How are you doing? If you clicked on this video, the answer to that might be not super great. So do me a favor, pull up a cuppa, and let's just have a little chat about this question of whether or not you should quit your teaching job. All right, so I'm filming this video in October, Friday the 13th, actually. And October is one of those times in a teaching year where you can just start to sense that it's hard. The job is tough, the newness has well worn off, Thanksgiving is far away, and you can become fatigued, especially if you have a difficult to manage class or classes. You're having a lot of students not do as well academically as you'd hope. Maybe you're teaching a new prep or 2 or 3 or 4. Could be you're getting some administrative flack or confusion from district office. There's a lot of things that can start to be very felt problems around this time of year. I've actually got 2 colleagues right now, close friends of mine, who have both said to me in different conversations that they are actively looking for other jobs. And after the second of these conversations, I kind of looked up at my calendar and I said, oh yeah, it is that time of year, isn't it? And while I'm not currently job seeking this October, there have been Octobers where I've been in that boat and I'm just thinking, gosh, there's got to be a better way for me to make a living than this. So should you do it? Should you actively search for jobs? Should you get your parachute packed so you can jump out of this dive bombing airplane called education? Well, that depends. One of the colleagues that prompted this video is frustrated because he feels like he just doesn't really have space to enjoy his life. He's got 4 preps right now, and he's just a hyper conscientious teacher who is going to bring his absolute best to each one of his preps. So when you have 4 different preps, that means you're going to have to spend a lot of time thinking about and working on 4 different classes. And so workload wise, you have a ton of work to do in that situation. So if you've been working that hard, working every single night, working some weekend time, trying to do things like give student feedback, plan great lessons, collaborate with same course colleagues, then yeah, by October, you're just thinking, gosh, this is really a drag. Now this person doesn't hate his job. He's not bad at it. He's actually amazing. But I don't care how much you love your job, how amazing at it you are, if you're working 60 or 70 hours a week. I don't know how many hours this individual's working, but that's a normal work week for teachers in this type of situation. And then you start doing things like looking at your paycheck or talking to relatives or friends outside of education. All of a sudden, it's just super easy to think, gosh, there's got to be a better way to do this. So if that's your situation, if you're just working around the clock and you're exhausted, first of all, know that it's super normal to be having an adverse reaction to that. It makes total sense. You're not a sellout. You're not meant to be a teacher. You're just experiencing large amounts of time pressure and energy pressure, and you've been experiencing them now for several months, and there's just not a way to be a human being and not have that affect your sense of well-being and flourishing. That's just going to take a toll. For folks in this type of situation, what I would say before you put in your 2 weeks notice is experiment with satisficing. I write about satisficing in these 6 things in a couple of different places. I'm just going to read you the definition that I include on page 164. Satisfice is a verb created by Nobel laureate Herbert Simon in the 1950s as the combination of the words satisfy and suffice. I tend to describe it to people as satisfying the requirements of a task while sacrificing the optimal level of completing that task. Does that make sense to you? So you're basically reaching the requirement of a task. So in this case, let's say for 1 of your preps out of 3, you're going to reach the requirements for teaching that prep, but you're going to sacrifice the performance between that satisfactory level and the best possible level that you're capable of. So you're giving up some of your potential performance, some of your potential achievement, some potential perfection and excellence. You're giving that up and allowing yourself to reduce the quality of instruction in that prep to satisfactory due to the inordinate number of expectations that we face as educators. Knowing when and how to satisfy is a critical skill for flourishing as a teacher. So I would say default settings for being an educator is we have crazy amounts of expectations placed upon us by ourselves, colleagues, our departments, our bosses, our students, their parents, our community, policymakers. Tons of expectations are placed on the teacher just by default. But now if you've got a situation like 4 preps, that's just like multiplied by 4. And so before you quit your job, if you're feeling overworked, look really hard at all the tasks that you're doing in a day and ask yourself, where could I conceivably satisfice and not lose my job? And the thing with satisficing is you're probably never going to lose your job for doing it because you're still meeting satisfactory levels. It's not like you're saying, I'm just going to not plan lessons anymore for one of my preps. But you are saying, I'm going to experiment for using the same types of routines again and again and again, the same types of lesson chunks again and again and again in one or more of my preps. I really, really want to encourage you, if you're in the overworked condition, play around aggressively with satisficing. Play around aggressively with satisficing. And then the other thing that I would say, this is going to kind of force your hand at satisficing, set strict working hours for yourself. So maybe it's 6 a.m. until 5 p.m. That's still a really hefty work week, but that's less than many teachers in this overworked condition work on the weekends. Give yourself maybe Saturday mornings until 11 a.m., not as much time as you can get on a Saturday and Sunday. By setting these strict rules for yourself and even sharing them with an accountability partner, you're now going to have a finite amount of time in which to do your job, and it's going to force you, if you're strict with yourself, to figure out which work matters the most and which work can be satisficed. And another important side benefit of this work schedule approach is that you're going to have time that's protected against work. So like if you're a 6 a.m. to 5 p.m. person, 5 p.m. and on, that's time when you're not allowed to work. And I'm including checking your work email, answering work-related text messages. Like you're not allowed to do anything. There's no encountering of work during times when you've decided you're not going to work. And so now that vacuum is going to have to be filled, hopefully, by things that give you a sense of identity outside of work, a sense of achievement outside of work, or just a sense of fulfillment, a sense of rest, a sense of enjoyment of the rest of life. Usually these two tools, satisficing and having a strict work schedule, can help you escape from the overworked state and also let you gain some wisdom as well. However, if you do that for a month and you play around with satisficing and work schedules and you're still miserable, then it probably is time for you to do an honest soul search and ask, is it time for me to try a different line of work for a little while? Because ultimately, colleague, if you do decide to quit your teaching job, you need to understand there's no shame in that. There are so many good endeavors in which to invest your hours of labor each week. There's so many great jobs, great ways of contributing to society. I mean, unless you're like slinging meth or running a brothel, unless you're doing those extreme things, it's good work. Listen, teaching is a beautiful job. I love that we get to invest in young people, that we are paid to make these contributions that are going to have impacts that we'll never fully see. I think that there's a great and deep beauty to that. But it doesn't mean that that's the only way to work a job that has deep and great beauty. The other colleague who spoke to me was more struggling with some really toxic classroom environments that he's seen take place. He's been teaching for a long time too, and he's a competent classroom manager, super great instructor. He's great at facilitating student growth, but he's just getting worn down by some of the really anti-school, anti-learning attitudes that he's encountering day after day after day after day in some of his classes, and that's just becoming demoralizing to him. And again, I really hope that this guy doesn't quit his job because he's an amazing teacher. He has a beautiful impact every single year. I've seen it firsthand. I've heard about it secondhand, and frankly, selfishly, I just love working with him. So if you're in that situation, I'd encourage you first, again, hold out for a month before you pull the 2 weeks notice out and just experiment with some of the strategies that I write about in The Will to Learn. You can find a ton of treatments of those here on my YouTube channel, but probably the best thing is just to grab a copy of the book and just give yourself an hour or two to get into it one weekend. I work really hard at the beginning of the book to lay out a vision for student motivation that's, I think, pretty pressure light on the teacher and also opportunity high. I think about student motivation as a thing that is super challenging, super painful when it's not present. I mean, that's one of the first ideas I introduced in the book, is that student demotivation is painful for the student and for us and for everyone else. Okay, but the central message of the book is that there just are things that we can do with confidence, knowing that if we do these things again and again and again, we are cultivating student motivation in the hearts of our students, and that those things are making a difference whether or not we see it right now or not. But again, as you're doing that, you have to remind yourself that there's just so much that you don't control. You don't control the fact that if you're a high school teacher, you're encountering some students who maybe have had multiple years of just pure demotivation motivation, reinforcing negative beliefs about school. And so when these students are presenting to you some of these really toxic attitudes, it's so much not about you, and it's so much just about them and the brutal place that they are right now in internally. So you've got to depersonalize that. You have to remind yourself of past wins that you've had, the past students that you've related to. You know, some teachers I know, they have, senior pictures that their past students have given them hanging on their bulletin board. I think those are really good to look at those and just have some that you know will resonate with your heart and remind you like, gosh, I have had some great opportunities in this job. Not all students are like that. Not all students are these current ones that are really dragging me down. But with all that said, again, I have to say there are so many good things that you can do with your career, and if you're finding yourself continuously dragged down in your spirit by this job, there is no shame in taking a break, and maybe your break will last for the rest of your life. You'll still always have the years that you taught and all those countless students most of whom you'll never know you impacted for the better. There's still so much to be proud of in your career, whether it's been a year or 20. So I guess the gist of this video is, in answering that question, should you quit your teaching job? Not yet, but maybe. Not yet, because I want to encourage you to try these things: satisficing, a strict work schedule, strategies, and the will to learn. Because I write about these concepts knowing that they have helped me get through these crises, and they've helped many others that I've interacted with. So that's the not yet part. But if we think realistically, there is going to come a time when all of us are going to quit teaching. We're either going to retire or we're going to career change. Eventually, we'll probably quit. Unless you die up there with an apple in your hand in front of the green chalkboard, you're going to quit. And that's okay. We're finite creatures. We can only work at a thing so long. And the question for you, colleague, is just how much longer do you want to do this? I hope it's much longer, because if you're watching a video like this, it shows me that you care, that you believe in this work, that there's a fire in you that I know spreads into the souls of your students. But I also would never wish sustained spiritual pain on any human being. That's just some food for thought. Take care.